I did a poll today. We want to go ahead and put this poll up. Let's go ahead. I did a series of questions today on my Twitter account. Now, granted, my Twitter following is right. I mean, every Twitter following is going to be skewed to the people that want to follow a particular person. I follow a variety of people, a lot of people I don't agree with, but I just follow them to get the variety of viewpoints. But you can pretty much safely assume that's typically not the situation. So I get it that this is a skewed poll. This is definitely not some scientific, well done poll. I just wanted to put it out there and see how people answered. So this is a series of questions that I put out there today. Should the Palestinian people be disarmed is the question. And the majority of people said no, the Palestinian people should not be disarmed. Let's go to the next one. Follow-up question. Are you pro-gun rights? Are you a pro-gun rights American? So this is the question I wanted. If you think they should be disarmed, but you are a pro-Second Amendment American, that is an inconsistent, hypocritical viewpoint. And the people that said that they are pro-gun rights American, they said, yes, I am, and I voted no, that the Palestinian people should not be disarmed. So that's a consistent viewpoint, right? I need to actually pull up my own. Let me pull this up so I can remember what the past questions were, because this question relies on the past question. The past question, should the Palestinian people be disarmed? Okay, so your answer should be yes, I am pro-Second Amendment, and no, they should not be disarmed. So 44%. So the majority of people are consistent in that viewpoint. The people that said yes, I am a pro-Second Amendment American, and I voted yes, they should be disarmed. That is 30% of the people right there who are hypocritical, because I'm just saying the Palestinian people. So 30% are hypocrites right there. I should have gun rights, but you should not have gun rights. Okay. There was 7.6% who said no, they are not pro-gun rights Americans, and they voted yes. That could also be a foreigner. I realized this later after I posted this, that you might not be a pro-gun rights American because you might be like a Canadian, you might be a Brit, you might be from somewhere else, right? So your answer could be no, and you voted yes, the Palestinian people should be disarmed. So you could also be a non-pro-rights American. You could be somebody who believes the Second Amendment shouldn't exist and that we should be banning guns in this country. And therefore, you are consistent if you say, no, I am not a pro-Second Amendment American. And I also voted, yes, they should be disarmed. That's actually consistent. So 7.6% of the people are consistent in that viewpoint, along with the people who are pro-Second Amendment and also think that the Palestinian people should have the right to bear arms. So about half the people who took this poll, when you take that 44% and 7.6%, about half of the people were consistent in their viewpoints, but the other half were not. So those that said, no, I am not a pro-gun rights American, and I also voted no, they should not be disarmed. Again, it's a little bit murky because it could be non-Americans. I didn't phrase that quite right, but you get the idea. 50% of the people that took this were consistent in the viewpoint, and another 50% maybe were not. Let's move on to the next question. Another one, should Ukrainians be disarmed? So a lot of people, especially who follow me on my Twitter account, think that NATO caused the aggression against Ukraine, and they've been very much, some of them have been outright pro-Russia. I am not pro-Russia nor pro-Ukraine. I just think that NATO aggressed that war, and I don't really give an opinion on Russia and what Russia does. I don't have control over Russia. I'm an American. I can only vote and have control over American politicians and American policy, and NATO is an American policy. So that is kind of how when I am vocal about an opinion, it's usually about only policy I can actually change. I can't change Russia or Russians and what they're doing over there, but I can certainly try to influence American policy. That is kind of my viewpoint on that. So, but should Ukrainians be disarmed? 25% said yes, they should be disarmed. And 75% said no, they should not be disarmed. I'm curious, I did not ask the question. I'm curious how many people think Ukrainians should be disarmed who are also pro-Second Amendment Americans, but they're really against the Russia-Ukrainian situation. They're more for Russia, or they're just more against Ukraine or against Ukraine getting money. So it's just kind of an interesting question. Let's go on to the next one. Should Russians be disarmed? More people said no. So more people were in favor of Ukrainians being disarmed than Russians being disarmed. I find that interesting. Should have been the same. Should have been the same. but it isn't. More people did seem to favor Russians being armed than Ukrainians. Let's go on to the next one. Should Palestine be allowed a military? So previously I asked if Palestinian people should be disarmed, and most people said no, they should not be disarmed. But should Palestine be allowed a military? And the vast majority of people said yes, that Palestine should be allowed a military. Okay, we're going to get into some where this might get hypocritical in the end, but 83% said yes, Palestine should have a military. Okay, let's go to should Ukraine be allowed a military? And yes, 79% said yes. So almost the same number of people that said Palestine should have a military. Almost the same people said Ukraine should be allowed a military. Let's see about Russia. More people said Russia should have a military. 94% said Russia should have a military versus 79% for Ukraine and 83% for Palestine. I didn't ask about the US or Israel having a military. I assume everybody says yes on that. Although I should have asked those questions, I guess, if the US and if Israel should have had a military, but I didn't. Does Israel have the right to disarm Hamas was my next question. I'm surprised on this one. Only 36.8% said yes, and 63.2% said no. They do not have the right to disarm Hamas. Let me see if I can look. I'm going to look deeper on my own Twitter to see if I can get comments on that one. This person says, I say yes only because their own charter calls for the elimination of the Jewish people. They're not the people themselves. Okay, another one said, this is a toughie. I would say yes due to the obvious conflict, but Hamas is not going to disarm itself. Good luck to the IDF in trying. The IDF will lose. So yeah, they can try. Another person said, every human being alive has the God-given right to defend themselves. Another person said, they're at war, so it's kind of a big part of war to have a military. Another person said, in a war, yes, they can. They have the right to disarm. Or that's the kind of big part of war to be able to disarm the others. And this person says, yes, anyone has the right to disarm anyone, even me in America, but there's a lot to go through before that happens. So, yeah, I do, I agree that I do think that any country has the right to attempt to disarm another country. I do think that's, I don't know if it's a right. It's a tough word to use, right? I don't know if it's your right. But it's certainly going to happen in war. I mean, that's war is war, and that's what's going to happen. It's not your right. That's just part of war, is that you're at war and you're trying to disarm your enemy, or you're trying to get to a peace agreement, right? So you're trying to get to one of the two. Usually it's like a ceasefire or a total disarmament. Okay, the next question. When Israel bombs civilian buildings that Hamas stores weapons in, who has the civilian blood on their hands? 21% said Hamas, 48% said Israel, and 30% said both. So a third of all people think both parties have blood on their hands, but more people actually think Israel. About half the people, 48.3%, think that, sorry, I'm looking at updated numbers. So if my numbers are not matching what's on the screen, it's because I'm looking at the most recent, because we took these screenshots earlier today, and I'm looking at the actual Twitter feed right now. So just so you know, if my numbers are wrong, that's why. So right now it's at 48.2%, saying that Israel has more civilian blood on their hands when they're the ones that drop the bomb when the civilians are in the building. I agree with that, actually. I think that if somebody is using a human shield, just because they're using the human shield doesn't give you the right to kill that human shield. It's still a human. They're not actually a shield. That seems to be so basic. They're not actually a shield. That's a human. You do not have the right to kill that human, even if they're being used for a shield. They're not really a shield. So nobody has the right to kill an innocent person, no matter if they're being used. You have to go and find another way. You have to figure out another way. So I do think it is the person who shoots. I think if the cops, if I was, somebody invades my house and they grab me and the cop has been trying to get this guy for a long time, I don't think they have the right to shoot me to get to that guy. I just don't. That's just what I think. So I do think the cop would be at fault for killing me, not the guy that's holding me. The guy's just holding me. He's not killing me. He's just holding me. But the cop is actually killing me. That to me is the bigger crime. The guy shouldn't have held me. That's a crime. For sure, it's a crime, but it's not the same level of crime as murder. Murder is a different level of crime. Okay, the next question, does Russia have the right to demilitarize Ukraine? So this is where I was getting into this, right? Because there's a lot of people who say, well, if they're on the side of Palestine, they'd say maybe you don't have the right to demilitarize Palestine, but you do have the right to demilitarize Ukraine. I was wondering if people would do that. There's a lot of people who support Israel, super supportive of Israel, but are also not in support of Ukraine. And they might say, sure, you have the right, Israel has the right to demilitarize and Russia has the right to demilitarize. That would be a consistent viewpoint. I can respect that. So does Russia have the right to demilitarize Ukraine? 40.8% on this current one says yes. 59% say no, that Russia does not have the right to demilitarize Ukraine. So more people were against the demilitarization of Ukraine. This is where I get you. And then this is where I get you. Were the Allied nations right in disarming Germany, Japan, and Italy? Oh, suddenly everybody says yes. 54%. So the majority suddenly say yes, actually. When it comes to World War II, the Allied nations were right in disarming Germany, Japan, and Italy. So that's interesting because when you go back to, does Israel have the right to disarm Hamas? Most people say no. When we say, does Russia have the right to demilitarize Ukraine? Most people say no. But when I say, were the Allied nations right in disarming Germany, Japan, and Italy? Most people say yes. Yeah, you're a hypocrite. Oh, ding, ding, ding. It's a tough one, though, right? This is tough because history, we look back and we say, well, but the Nazis, they should not have had a military. And Japan and Italy, and they sided with them. The axes of evil at that point, they shouldn't have had a military. One thing I want to bring up, though, is, we took their military power away. And what we did do in exchange, and this is maybe something that when we look at the Israel-Palestine conflict, maybe this is what the solution is. I don't know if Israel will go for it. I don't think they will. But when it came to the Axis, the powers of evil during World War II, Germany, Japan, and Italy, we said to them, you're not allowed to have a military anymore. No. No to you. We did not take their land. What we did was we occupied somewhat with the attempt to rebuild. So it wasn't a real occupation. It was an occupation not in the same way that Palestinians are being occupied. It wasn't a hostile occupation. It's an occupation to rebuild. So it was military. Not only we're going to take your military away, but we will be your military. We will be your protector. So if something happens to you, then we will be the ones to protect you. And we see that now very staunchly. 75 years later, what do you have? You've got, we're majorly in Japan and Italy and Germany. And if anybody ever touched them, we would be right there fighting that battle. But we rebuilt those nations. We gave them prosperity. We didn't take their land. We didn't keep them in rubble. We didn't say you deserve this for being the awful people that you are, for what you did. We did not even say that to the Germans. If you were going to say that to one group of people and to say, well, you deserve this because you're right now what I'm hearing on Fox News, I kept hearing earlier today that what happened on October 7th in Israel was like the Holocaust. That what's going on with Hamas and the Israelis is like the Holocaust. I find that, quite frankly, an offensive analogy. I think that if you're not allowed to, look, 1,300 people, it is absolutely atrocious what happened to the Israeli people. No doubt that terrorist attack was terrible. The terrorist attack on 9/11 in New York City was terrible. No matter, what theory you want to get into on why wasn't the security there, all these other questions. Look, the civilians that were suffering in that moment, they don't care if it was a psyop or if it was, whatever the reasoning was behind that person's anger. They're not sitting there saying, you know what, my country's been occupying your people for 75 years. Go ahead and slaughter me. Nobody says that. They're being slaughtered. They're innocent people, women, children, men, innocent people, and they're being slaughtered. And there's no rhyme or reason for it other than just anger and revenge. And that's never an okay reason. But 1,300 people is not 6 million. This is not even anywhere close to the Holocaust. By no means, no stretch of any imagination can we even claim that. But it is being claimed all over the news. But but there was a Holocaust, right? And there was a group of a whole nation that enacted this with very atrocious policies, and yet, we did not put Germany into rubble and say, you people just deserve what you get because of you supported the Nazis, you were the Nazis, you did all these terrible things. And you tried to kill all the Jews. They actually did try to kill all the Jews. And yet, we're going to come in and we're actually going to rebuild your country. We're going to, if anybody tries to hurt you, we will be there to defend you and we're going to rebuild you. And now Germany is a very, very prosperous nation. Why is there not this same sort of plan for the Palestinians? Why is there not the plan of, okay, look, you're doing something really bad. We're going to eliminate that political faction, and that is what they're doing with Hamas, right? They're saying we want to get rid of Hamas. That's fair. You're going to get rid of the Nazis. You can get rid of Hamas. I think you should get rid of the Nazis in Ukraine, right? You should be getting rid of all these. Anybody who has a genocidal way of thinking, I think it's fair, I suppose. So you do that, but that is not the Palestinian people, just like the German people were not the Nazis, right? And so then why are we not then saying we're going to go in and occupy, in that we will defend you against aggression, against land grabs. We're not going to take your land. We're not going to do it that way, but we will give you military protection and we will rebuild you. We will flood in enormous amounts of money in order to rebuild your nation into something very prosperous and wonderful, like we did with Japan, like we've done with Germany, and somewhat Italy. Why is that not being discussed? Well, because that's not the plan. The Israelis don't want to give up that land. Netanyahu has been completely open and transparent about annexing the West Bank, taking the land. There's outright calls for moving the Palestinians out of Israel, ethnic cleansing the whole country. These are not fringe groups. These are mainstream politicians. These are mainstream commentators, and they're calling for an ethnic cleansing of that country. That would be akin to us saying we're going to just get rid of the Germans, like push them away, or we're going to get rid of the Italians, or we're going to get rid of the Japanese, and we're taking the land and it's ours now, and that's what we're going to do. But that's not what happened. And instead, after World War II, we said to all of the Jewish people, here's another place for you to go live, and go there. And instead of giving them part of Germany, which would have made more sense, instead we say, we're going to give you this other lot of land where these other people are living. These other people aren't going to like it very much, and they're going to feel like you're taking their homes and that you're ethnically cleansing them out of there. And I guess we'll just let you go do that. To make that make sense, I don't really understand that. Now, people want to go back 2,000 years, and they want to say, well, but that was their land promised to them by God. They're originally from there. Well, again, inconsistency to remain not hypocritical. I don't believe in the right to return. I just don't. I don't think I have the right to go return to Vietnam because my mother is from Vietnam. I'm only one generation, and yet I don't think I have the right to go live there. Like, that's my land. I have the right to be here because of my ethnic origin. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with any right to return at all for anybody. I'm pretty staunch on that one. I don't even think the Palestinian refugees who are living in refugee camps outside of Palestine that got pushed out in 1947 or in 1967, they are calling for a right to return. I don't believe they have a right to return. I don't believe the Jewish nation has a right to return law. They say that you have the right to return and live in Israel. The Palestinian people that got pushed off and that are living in refugee camps, they don't have the right to return to their homes, but they have a law that says if you're Jewish, you have the right to return to this land, and we're going to give you land, and you can live here, and the ethnic people that have been living here have to go, but you can come here, even if you're not really identifying as Jewish, as long as your grandparent was Jewish. And there's actually some infighting in Israel about that. They say, well, no, it shouldn't be if your grandfather was Jewish. It needs to be your grandmother. There's some infighting there on who's Jewish and who isn't Jewish, but only Jewish people have the right to return. I don't agree with the right to return either. So the consistency has to be there. I think when we are looking at our own, what we agree with when it comes to, any situation, I think it's important for us to kind of have sit-down session with ourselves and ask ourselves, am I a hypocrite? Am I consistent in my viewpoint? How do I reconcile this? Um, what is my argument? And again, I can respect you if you're consistent. I don't have to agree with you, but I can respect it. I respect that Joe Biden is being consistent, I suppose, that if the Democrats really think that they're defending liberal democracy and that's what the countries that they want to, that's why they're also saying they want to go to war for Taiwan, right? It's the same reasoning. It is logical. I'll give them that. It's logical. It's just, should we be, then the question is, but then do we go to war for this? Is this something we go to war for, or do you just let them work it out and figure out how to get to democracy on their own? We certainly did. Or did we? No, maybe we didn't. No, because the Revolutionary War, we had a fight for that. And we were under a British monarchy. It gets tricky. So then, I guess if you see, this is happening in real time now. You guys are watching it. Am I a hypocrite? If I think it's okay for the United States to have fought for independence away from British monarchies, do I think it's okay for us to then fight on, and the French came to our aid. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be here as America at this point. We would have done what Canada did and what Australia and India, right? We would have eventually gotten to that place, but we instead decided to go to war for it. But that's the other thing. Did we have to go to war for it? Because other countries were able to achieve essentially the same exact outcome without going to war. So there's questions there around that. There were a lot of countries, by the way, where slavery ended with no war. A lot of these outcomes that we say we fought for this and we ended up with this wonderful outcome, a lot of places ended up with that same exact outcome without ever having to once go to war. So then the question is, do we ever need war? We could go on and on and on all night on this philosophical journey, and I appreciate you appeasing me with this one tonight. But we could go on and on and on forever. But I'd love to hear from you about it and get your thoughts. Just email me, Kim@KimIversen.com.